Welcome to the bonus show. All of a sudden, patriotic Bud Light is facing a boycott from the right wing because of a partnership with Dylan Mulvaney, who has become a Flashpoint transgender influencer. So let's see. I want to make sure I'm explaining all of this correctly, Pat. Dylan Mulvaney is a trans woman who is very much disliked by many of like the Daily Wire people and people on the right. Honestly, I don't know why. I think it's just because she got some attention from Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden kind of like wishing her well.
That must be it. I didn't know who Dylan Mulvaney was before this story. Apparently, she's a highly influential social media personality on TikTok and Instagram. But it's just amazing how the right wing is so into pop culture, seemingly more so than the left are at this
Yeah.
point. Because, like I said, I didn't know who she was, and you barely are aware of her as well.
So the whole dust up is because Budweiser sent Dylan a Bud Light can that was personalized with her face on it, commemorating being a girl for 365 days. There was this video, Mulvaney, it's called Day 365 of Girlhood. It's a video series. It's had viral success. It sort of like has charted Dylan's transition. And of course, right-wing social media users are saying this is absolutely terrible. It's time to boycott Bud Light. It's time to boycott the entire company, Anheuser-Busch, and so on and so forth. This has happened to other brands. Hershey's did a campaign with a trans rights activist on some chocolate bar wrappers in Canada. For International Women's Day, there were calls for a boycott there. And now this is the call. So what's really interesting about this is, I have to tell you, Pat, I think Bud Light is just terrible beer. I don't drink Bud Light at this point, at my age, and sort of like in my social circles. No one I know drinks Bud Light. The people who seem to drink Bud Light culturally seem to actually be the right wingers that are really angry about this. So I actually love it for that reason, because it goes right to the heart of this cultural element that is overwhelmingly more popular among the American right wing, as far as I can tell.
Well, as far as the taste of Bud Light goes, I'll agree that it's not the best, but I will say it's probably the best among the cheap beers. Like I would rank it over Miller Lite and Coors Light. So
I don't
the best
know.
of the worst, we can say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is probably not going to be a boycott that lasts very long because I think the right will eventually just forget about it. You mentioned Hershey's. There's so many other brands too that they've tried to boycott over the years. Like remember Nike during
Yep.
the Colin Kaepernick era. There was Starbucks because they decided to hire a bunch of refugees in response to Trump's travel ban. The NFL, apparently, the right is still boycotting, or maybe they aren't. I have no idea
I'm not
anymore.
sure.
Disney's the new one as well. So it's all these different brands. It just seems so incredibly difficult to keep track of it. And
Yeah.
it just becomes so implausible at a certain point.
Not to mention the people with all of these boycotts are the ones who said they were against boycotts when it was like, hey, we kind of think you shouldn't advertise with Tucker Carlson. Now they're boycotting everything.
Yeah, and over this issue in particular, it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense because, I mean, the right claims that trans people are a threat to America because, I don't know, they're trying to target the children with drag shows or whatever the case may be. But in this instance, if there was just a commemorative Bud Light can that they sent over to Dylan Mulvaney, how is that affecting society at all? How is this impacting the kids? How is this a political issue in the slightest? And how is this worthy of being boycotted over? It just doesn't make any sense at all.
None of it makes any sense. But honestly, on this one, go ahead and boycott the Bud Light. I could not care less one way or the other. It really makes no difference to me.
Do you think that this could have any impact at all, even if it's like a 2% decline, a 5%
Maybe.
decline in Bud Light sales? I just don't even think that that would be enough for the company to change course. Like maybe they'll think twice before getting involved in politics or what could conceivably overlap with the political realm, but that's probably the best they can hope for.
That's the one curiosity I have. Is this going to have any impact at all? And if so, what happens? We'll follow it and we will see. Very interesting story out of North Carolina that many of you sent me. A North Carolina lawmaker has switched parties, and this is potentially going to open the door to stricter abortion laws. So here's what's going on. This is a Democratic North Carolina lawmaker, House member Tricia Cotham. Cotham was a Democrat, ran as a Democrat. Her mother was a longtime Democratic member of a commission and state DNC. Her father was chair of the county's Democratic Party. She previously served in the House of Representatives in North Carolina from 2007 to 2016 and returned in January. Her stance on a number of issues is consistent with the Democratic Party. She's against new abortion restrictions. She supports LGBT rights, supports public education. But recently, she's had a couple of votes that have been with the Republican Party. She required this included voting on a bill requiring sheriffs to cooperate with ICE, which is something many on the left don't like, and a couple of other issues. So the important thing that's going on is that early yesterday, Cotham announced she's going to switch from being a Democrat to a Republican. She says she's been bullied by Democrats, and so she is switching. This would give the Republican Party 72 seats in the House. That's exactly the number you need for a veto-proof majority. It has the numbers in the Senate, meaning that Republicans will be able to enact policies over the opposition of the governor, who's a Democrat, Roy Cooper. So essentially, Pat, this means that Republicans can do whatever they want in the state other than things that would be challenged for legal reasons, because they have veto-proof majorities in both the state House and the state Senate. So this is immediately raising calls for Tricia Cotham to resign. I got people asking me, should this trigger a recall election because she ran as a Democrat and now she's switched and it's deceptive and it's fraudulent? This is a really complicated situation.
Well, I'd imagine Tricia Cotham is not going to resign over this, just like how Kirsten Sinema didn't resign when she became an independent in
Correct.
Arizona. And my question is this actually Cotham having a change of heart, having some sort of political awakening, or does she just see the opportunity and feel as though, okay, well, if I make this switch, then maybe I'll be able to raise my name recognition in the state and potentially run for a higher office as a Republican? Is this really just to further her own interests, or is this something that she genuinely wanted to do because she felt as if the left was bullying her too much or whatever bogus reason she came up with? My guess is that it was just based on personal interests. And with regards to like a recall, I mean, I don't know what the law is on the books right now in North Carolina, but you can't just, if a recall election process doesn't already exist, you can't try to go about doing that. You just have to wait for her to serve out the term and then try to get her out of office in the next election.
So North Carolina does not provide for recall through state law, but more than 500 individual municipalities, I guess, have recall provisions, although in many cases they've never actually been used. So I don't even know that she can be recalled because this would be a state level. Well, it's not state level because it would just be the district that she represents, but it's not obvious that there is even the provision to recall her.
I suppose you could put the blame back on the voters, because my sense is that Cotham wasn't like a true out and out progressive, right? Because like, imagine a scenario where Bernie Sanders or AOC decided to leave the Democratic Party and become a Republican, right?
Yeah.
It's just totally inconceivable. That sort of thing would never happen. And if voters thought that they were electing a progressive in Cotham, then, they wouldn't run into that sort of risk. But they did have alternatives to her. They could have picked someone else in the primary who they thought would be more to the left of her.
True.
That would have no shot of ever switching to the Republican Party or even voting with Republicans at any point. So they decided ultimately to pick her in the primary. You can kind of place the blame back on voters, knowing that there would be the potential for this to happen. But, it's probably sad in this instance that there isn't a recall election, because it is somewhat fraudulent, right? She was elected as a Democrat. You would want her to stick out the term as a Democrat.
I think I'm not making this argument, but I think the best argument that you could make for what scenario could lead to her forcible removal would be one that there's no evidence for, and it would be as follows. If you could show, Pat, that she was in league with Republicans when she ran, she planned to do this, and maybe even Republicans supported her financially in some way in running as a Democrat with the idea of eventually flipping to a Republican. If you could demonstrate that, and again, I'm not alleging that happened. I'm just saying hypothetically, there are laws, and I don't know if these are federal or state laws, which prevent the running of straw candidates. This came up in Florida when it seemed as though Matt Gaetz was maybe involved in running some straw candidate in 2018. I'm like the details, or maybe it was 2020. I don't remember now. If you could make an argument under the straw candidate rules and you could demonstrate that this was a plot from the beginning by Republicans and funded by Republicans with Cotham's knowledge, I think then and only then would you be able to say she's got to go. And again, I don't believe that the facts point to that being the case.
I suppose that overlaps with the logic that many are using to try to oust George Santos, which is this idea that Santos ran as someone who he actually isn't, right? He claimed to have all these credentials that he doesn't have. And if voters were aware of who the real George Santos was, they wouldn't have voted for him. But you can also say that it's really incumbent on the candidates who are running against whoever ends up winning the election to do their due diligence, to do the opposition research, and to bring these issues to the attention of the voters.
True.
And the voters should ultimately decide. Like, if there was a real failure here, it seems to have been on the part of the people running against her. And, if the voters didn't want someone who was like a true progressive who had absolutely no risk of ever going to the Republican Party, well, then ultimately that's the person that they chose.
Yeah.
So where I come down on this is that it's highly unfortunate, but assuming you can't recall her, you're just going to have to wait until the next election, probably.
We will follow it and see if and what further fallout there is. A number of you sent me an article of a judge ordering Stormy Daniels to pay Donald Trump $120,000 in legal fees. And that is absolutely true in a completely unrelated case. Donald Trump was in New York getting arrested criminally. A judge in Los Angeles granted Trump a legal victory. The NPR reports that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Trump and told Stormy Daniels, the very same adult film star who is partially connected to the 34 felony counts in New York City, Stormy has to pay Trump $121,000 in legal fees for a failed defamation suit. She tried to file suit for defamation against Trump. That is not going forward, and now she owes Trump legal fees. I think there's not that much to discuss, Pat, about the case insofar as this has been going on for a while. There are other defamation suits. There's the E. Jean Carroll one. It's going to take a while for all of these things to be adjudicated. The important thing is that the timing is confusing some people into thinking that this portends victory for Trump criminally in New York City. Criminal and civil are completely different things. The jurisdictions are completely separate. The charges, we're talking about criminal charges in New York. This was defamation. There is no connection other than Stormy Daniels' name between these two cases. And I don't think it's wise to read anything into this decision when you're trying to explore what will happen in New York City.
Right. There is no overlap to be drawn here. I'd imagine many on the right will point to this and show that it's proof that somehow the affair didn't take place or Trump shouldn't be criminally charged. But the two things have nothing to do with one another. Interestingly enough, Daniels said that she wouldn't have brought this defamation suit forward if not for the influence of Michael Avenatti.
Right.
And because, he's now sitting in prison right now and his name has been completely tarnished. I wonder if, that would go anywhere to help her case, but apparently not, because this judgment now has ruled that she has to pay for Trump's legal expenses. I also wonder if this when this initially went down back in 2018, when we started to hear about this case, when Michael Cohen was being prosecuted for it, if there was more of an attention paid to Trump and there was a willingness at that time to go after Trump criminally, if they ever would have brought this defamation case, if it would have ever had to get to that level. Because I kind of get the sense that Stormy Daniels and her representation at that point wanted to hold Trump accountable for what took place, but they realized it wasn't going to happen in criminal court, at least at that time. So this is how they decided to go about doing it.
I agree. I think that it's quite plausible that was there more of a sense that Trump would actually held accountable is too much, right? Because just because you've been charged doesn't mean you're being held accountable. But that there was even the possibility of criminal charges. I think that this defamation suit may not have gone forward. But this is where we are right now. And a judge has decided Stormy Daniels does owe Trump the legal fees. What's funny is Trump rarely pays his lawyers, from what we know. But on that issue, he has to have fronted some money for all of this criminal defense work that he's having done now, right? Or could it be that even now these lawyers just want the publicity and they're willing to wait on payment, which may never come? Could that be?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, the publicity could be enough for these lawyers because obviously this is going to get a whole bunch of attention and it's going to help them further their careers. At the same time, I'd imagine that if Trump was ever going to pay lawyers for any sort of case, this would be the one because this is the one that conceivably result in him ending up in prison. So
True.
this is the one that you'd actually want to pay people for. But I'm 50-50 on that one. I don't know if they're actually getting paid or if they'll ever get paid.
Quick reminder, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I will be off and we will have a number of different great guest hosts. I will be hosting tomorrow's Friday show. I'll be off Monday through Thursday, back Friday, and then the following week as well. So just as a heads up to everybody. But before any of that, we'll be back tomorrow with a new show and a new bonus show.